Hi guys, it's Kate Reardon here, and I am joined by the beautiful Tina Nance, who is one of my most treasured teachers and mentors, and I'm so excited to be bringing her wisdom and her knowledge to you guys today, because honestly, this woman, I have learned so much from her. I don't know how she fits everything in that pretty little head of hers, but she is a yoga therapist. She is trained in the Chinese Meridian system. She has healing modalities. She's just been practicing mindfulness and yoga and done so many trainings for the last decade, really. And she's also a teacher trainer, and I was trained by Tina when I did my yoga teacher training, and I'm so excited to be sitting with you today and bringing all of this magic in. And we're going to talk about mindfulness, because it's something that is so important, and we've dedicated this whole pillar to really understanding what it means. But it's this bit of a buzzword. You know, there's like mindfulness books and mindfulness meditations, and there's this kind of energy around it that is a little bit confusing to people, like what is it actually?
Sure.
So what I want to do is really extract what mindfulness is to you, and how we can really incorporate it in our day-to-day practice, because reading all the books and having that information's great, but it's not really going to help you if you're not putting it into action.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, like you said, you know, I've been teaching. Actually, I've been teaching for about 14 years. I've been practicing for about 20, and in that time, I've explored lots of different avenues. But I think I could really honestly say that mindfulness to me is the most valuable in the moment tool that I use to this day. And that's because it really is where the rubber hits the road, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So for me, what mindfulness is, the way that I would define it, is just the recognition in the moment that I'm not the voice in the head. And so that voice in the head that's constantly projecting a narrative, a description about the moment, which is entirely based on my past, on my conditioned past. Most of us spend most of the time totally identified to that voice in the head, which means that limited belief system, that limited perception of my thinking mind is running the entire show. And the yogis would describe that as the root of suffering. In fact, all the wisdom traditions would describe that addiction, that attachment to the mind, as being the root of human suffering. And in my own direct experience, that's absolutely true. Because the perceptions of that limited thought process based on my past is like this tiny grain of sand on the whole ocean floor of wisdom that's actually available to me. And I'm just constantly relying on this grain of sand. And so the thing is, you know, as long as I'm addicted to that, there's no space for me to start to question or have any inquiry around what that voice is saying and whether it's really true. So as long as that addiction is in place, there's no freedom, there's no choice. So what mindfulness for me gives me in the moment, space between me and what that voice is saying. And in that space, I can start to access more of the ocean floor rather than just being the grain of sand. And if I'm in really conscious self-inquiry practice, I can turn and actually look at that thought and use particular processes to inquire, is that really true? And I can anchor in the body and use different techniques to see if what I'm thinking is actually aligned with the truth. But really, in the moment, just moment to moment, it allows me time to go, oh, okay, I can see the thoughts spinning. And in that moment, I can just choose to drop into the body, to come back into my breath, to take some slow, deep breaths into my belly, to kind of ground into this present moment. And just in that space, I start to notice what's happening in the body. And so the principle of mindfulness that I work with, primary foundational principle, is if the thoughts that I'm attached to, the thoughts that I'm aligning with, if they're not aligned with my ultimate truth, the truth of who I am, it literally manifests as a contraction in the body. And later we can go into how that works, the science of that, if you like.
Yeah.
But it literally manifests as a physical contraction. So if in the moment, I take a moment just to hear the voice in the head, drop into the body, come into my breath, and I can feel that my body is tensing in any way, I know that what I'm feeding into is BS. You know, I know that it's aligned with something outside of my truth. And so in that moment, I don't need to figure anything out. That would just be employing more thoughts, right? in that moment, I can just feel that contraction and bring my awareness to the body entirely. So I can just notice, oh, actually, I'm feeling really tense in my solar plexus, my jaw is tight, and my shoulders are... So all I need to do is breathe and just soften. And as I drop into the moment, as I take a little space, the body's just going to start to relax open, because that's its natural state is relaxed and open. So it's just my identification with the thought that's creating the contraction.
Yeah.
And so as that happens and everything starts to soften open, in that space, often I refer to it as the portal of the present moment.
Ooh.
But in that space, then all of a sudden I can access the ocean floor, which is this space of just knowing. It doesn't come from the thinking mind, it doesn't come from figuring it out. It just comes from letting go and providing a little openness. And then the body relaxes, and quite often, whatever's tensing the body, I'll become more aware of what that is. That could express itself as an emotion. There might be a big sigh. Sometimes there might be tears, or, whatever the emotion moving looks like. And then just in that space, I'll have much more clarity about how to respond to the moment, rather than just be in the reaction, which is generated from the voice in the head. So moment to moment in my life, I'm constantly doing that. I'm constantly feeling the tension in my body and being like, oh, okay. Dropping in, softening, finding the breath, relaxing open, and then from that space, accessing a more intuitive response that's more aligned to the truth of the whole moment, that's not just coming from my separate egoic mind strategies of what's going to serve me. It's what's going to serve the whole, and what's really going to serve me ultimately.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's just this practice of embodiment and dropping in and letting go. It's not something really that I'm doing. It's just it's a practice of letting go and getting out of the way, so something can start to happen through that space.
I love that, and just that beautiful visual of dropping out of the grain of sand into the entire ocean, and just really seeing it in its simplicity as space.
Yeah.
For you to sit with whatever is coming up. And I want to delve deeper into the contraction piece of what happens within the body, because I've taken your classes, and honestly, you walk out of them just being like, oh my God, can I just move you into my brain? But it's beautiful and easy when you've got someone guiding you through it. But it's when shit really hits the fan, on those days when the kids are crying and the phone's ringing and all of that. It's like, how do we remind ourselves, I guess, to stop and drop in? How is the transition for you? I know this comes so effortlessly to you, but you've been practicing it for so long.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice would you say? And can you talk to a little bit more about what that contraction looks and feels like, so people can understand their own experience?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the first thing that I'd want to speak to is that despite having practiced this for a really long time, I also forget all the time. So it's important just to know that.
Why isn't it just inbuilt in our brains?
Why don't we just like this naturally? I mean, that's kind of the game, right? That's the game of life, is the forgetting and the remembering.
Yeah.
So the reason that I speak to that is I think that there's this illusion about what it is to be awake or awakening, or that there's this end point where I'm like, all the time, present and never, totally, forever, and it's just not true. It's just not the way that it is. And so I think it's really important for people to know that, because this really is a practice of totally accepting the moment as it is. So that means accepting every time you forget.
Yes.
With patience and compassion and kindness, and because beating ourselves up for oh my God, how am I here again? I mean, that's just more of the same. So first of all, just to know that I forget all the time, and that there's no end point where that's
you're not a guru?
Even the gurus forget all the time. But for a really long time, I was on this hamster wheel of one day I'm going to get somewhere, which meant I stayed in the place of not enough.
Yeah.
Until I realized that not enoughness was being generated by the idea that
there's somewhere to get to. Yeah.
It's a vicious circle.
Yeah.
So just to speak to that first. However, in order to remember quicker, in order so that you can eventually recognize, oh shit, did it again.
Yeah.
So that you can wake up in that moment. That to me does require regular practice.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be, having a really long practice. But for me, upon waking, at some point in the waking state, either when it's like when you first wake up in the morning, sitting and practicing meditation for 10 minutes, or maybe it's after you've prepared breakfast for the kids and done what you've had to do, and you just grab your 15 minutes wherever it fits into your lifestyle. Having a daily practice of committing 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes to just sitting, it kind of just rewires a new habit into your life stream.
Yeah.
You know, my usual habit is being totally addicted to the voice in the head.
Yeah.
So each day, a little reminder of like, today I'm going to set up that we're going to practice coming out of that habit and wire up, train up our capacity for presence. So just doing that every day. And so what that looks like is just sitting or lying. And I think one of the most important things to recognize about any meditation practice is that it doesn't require the absence of thought. You know, I think a lot of people have heard these ideas, empty your mind, or so all of a sudden it becomes this battle with your mind where you're trying to get rid of something that's here.
Yeah.
Whereas
the mind's going, I'm still here.
Yeah, and I'm not going anywhere. So how are you going to relate to me in a conscious way rather than fight me, which is futile?
Yes.
So I think that's really important to know
totally.
that you can be totally present when your thoughts are negative, positive or neutral, when your mind is full of thoughts or empty of thoughts. Your capacity to be present does not rely on the context or the content of the thinking mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So whatever's going on in the mind, you can meet that. You can be present to that.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to serve you when, you know, you're in a life moment and you're feeling really challenged and provoked, and, you know, it's all hitting the fan.
Yeah.
What's going to enable you to meet that is a practice of meeting the moment as it is, not clearing the moment to be something else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So a daily practice then would simply look like sitting and resting in the body. So I always start by just relaxing the body. I like to do it lying down. Many people like to do it sitting up to stay more wakeful. So I'll just come into the body and notice my body, become aware of my body, notice where it's contracted, invite it to relax, and then just start to make my home in the breath, which just means observing the inhale and observing the exhale.
Beautiful.
And that just drops me into this, what I call the seat of awareness, just that space that's able to observe this moment as it is, right, this present moment. And then inevitably, at some point, thoughts are going to come on into the moment. And rather than that being something that's in the way of meditation, that's just something else I'm observing that enters into the moment. And what we notice is when a thought arises, it has a very brief existence. It's there for a moment, and then it disappears.
Yeah.
And then another thought comes. It's there, has its say.
Has a chat.
It has a chat, and then it vanishes.
Yeah.
And if you watch, every single thought is impermanent. No single thought sticks around. So it's only our attachment to that thought and our engagement in it and our feeding it, and we get into a conversation with the thought that generates more thoughts.
Yeah.
But each individual thought arises, passes, arises, passes. So we're in this embodied place, aware of sensation. We're watching the breath. And we're just seeing the thoughts coming and going, coming and going. And we just stay sitting in that seat of awareness. And the thoughts may continue, they may slow down for a little while, they may, you know, whatever the thoughts are doing, we don't have judgment and we don't have preference. So the state is called equanimity. So we're just resting in this open awareness of the moment exactly as it is. So that means whatever thoughts come, whatever feelings come, whatever sensations come, we're just allowing them to be there for as long as they are, and then, you know, they move on through. And so just having a seated or lying practice where you're generating that capacity to be aware and radically accepting of the moment sets that up so that throughout the day, then how that translates into a moment-to-moment practice. Say I'm on my motorbike, living in Bali, I'm on my motorbike and I'm in traffic, so I get stuck behind a bike that's blasting exhaust fumes into my face, and there's lots of stimulation, and, you know, it's really intense, and I'm trying to get somewhere, and I fall asleep in terms of wakefulness, and all of a sudden I'm tensing and I'm like getting reactive and get out of the, you know, I fall into a conditioned reactive space. So if I have a daily practice where I'm kind of building that capacity for awareness, the more regular that is, the more quickly I remember. So all of a sudden I'll notice, I'm like this, and I'm not breathing, and my body's really tense, and you know. So I can start looking, oh, okay, my body's really tense. What thoughts am I engaging? What am I indulging mentally? What am I believing in? And then I'll start to see my thoughts are, entirely self-focused and entirely out of alignment. So I could be like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Come back to my body, feel my breath, breathe down into my belly.
Yeah.
Notice where I'm tense. As soon as I bring presence there, it starts to relax. And then I'll see the thoughts generating themselves. And from my practice, I know that those thoughts, they're totally fueled by my participation. If I don't engage them, if I don't fuel them, they're just going to come and go and come. So I just let those thoughts, I'm aware of them, they're still there. They're still like, but I let those thoughts just start to stream on by, and I stay with the breath and I stay with the body. And then that space that I opened up on the mat starts to open up in the moment of tension. And so, doing that is something like being on the motorbike, which has a certain level of stress.
Yeah.
Practicing that moment to moment is one thing. And then when it gets even deeper is when you start to practice that when you're really emotionally triggered by something that's a deep carved in pattern. Like, moving in and staying with your parents for a week, or stuff that comes up in your relationships.
Any relationship stuff I could imagine is
totally right, because it's
that's where we get to really
wounding.
practice. Yeah,
that's when we get to really practice.
Yeah,
and so it really serves if you have a stable morning practice and you have a moment-to-moment practice in those little stresses. So when the really big stuff comes, often I'll use this as an example. This is the voice in the head, and most of the time we're like this. And we use these little practices where we're like, we create a little space and then we can see that. Yeah. But when we're in the emotional trigger, it's like, it's really hard to get that space. Yeah. So the more that we have practice. So when you're feeling really triggered in an argument and you can feel all of that stuff is up, then you can remember and drop into the body, relax into the breath, start to see what you're thinking. And in the beginning, you'll be like, yeah, I'm thinking that. That's totally true. We're pretty addicted to it.
Yeah.
But we just keep coming back to the body and we keep breathing and allow those thoughts to be seen without necessarily believing in them. Let them start to drift on by, create the space. And then through the space, inevitably, our inherent wisdom starts to enter through that space. It's unavoidable because the only way we stay stuck to the patterns is by being attached to the thinking mind. That's the only place they live, is in the mind, the conditioned past. They don't exist in the present moment. So as soon as we create space and connection to the present, that's where wisdom lives. So it's inevitable. It's just really being committed to being present, no matter how intense it is in the body and the mind.
Yeah. And I love everything that you shared, but the thing about when you find yourself contracted and in that hard space again, to not judge it and just to be patient. And because I know for me it was so much, I'd be like, damn it, I'm not doing it right, and it just creates more of this like shit that you have to deal with. And so just really when you're pulling yourself, it's okay, just come back, just come back, and finding that real gentleness in that transition.
I feel like for me that root of compassion comes in the recognition of what it is that I'm actually asking myself to do. Like most of us have spent our entire lifetime, every minute of every day since we were God knows what age, totally identified to that voice. And humans are creatures of habit. You do something every minute of every day, that is deeply ingrained in the nervous system, hardwired in the neural pathways of the brain.
And we're taught to believe that is the absolute truth.
That's all we know. There's been no other education unless you've self-educated.
And exactly.
Then, and then so plus we're part of a collective field of consciousness. So it's not just our habit, it's the collective habit. And then depending on your belief system, it's either this lifetime or infinite amounts of lifetimes. So when you're arriving to the moment and unwiring that habit, the recognition of how deeply engraved that habit is, collectively as well as personally, even if you do that 1 second a day, good for you. I mean, that's huge.
That's true.
And so to really, often when I'm teaching, I'll say each time you recognize that you're attached, celebrate that moment. That's a moment of like, woohoo! It's huge. And for us to not overlook that, because we can get to the end of a practice and feel like, oh my God, I spent the entire time thinking.
Yeah.
But actually, maybe you had 5 moments of wakefulness, and those 5 moments are precious, they're gold, and they expand on themselves just by diligence, just by commitment. So it's patience and self-compassion and recognition of just exactly what it is that we're doing. You know, like it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
You know?
No.
But it does happen. Canteen.
Something that I want to delve into with you is that, and you keep mentioning, you know, come back into the body, into the body, and you can really feel when your body is contracted. But what does that actually feel like if someone's trying to recognize, because so many people are out of tune with their bodies. Like I'm surprised when I'm sitting down with clients sometimes and I'll say, when did you do your last poo? And they don't know. And it's so, because we live so much in that thinking space that you kind of even forget that you've got a body. So when you're starting to really drop in and feel, how does that feel in the body? Like what should some people be kind of looking for or curious about?
So first of all, I think the reason that I've been able to learn this from the inside out is because I generate daily embodiment. So I've always loved to dance and I've always loved yoga and movement. So ever since I was quite young, I've been involved in some kind of movement. So to encourage spending some time in the day in your body via yoga or even exercise or dance but when I say in your body, it's not just moving the body, because you can be at the gym working out and thinking about something else. It's about really being present to what you're doing. And that will just serve embodiment. Like over time, you'll just spend more time here. You'll just be aware of it more. So that's, I think, number one key. But in the moment, how do we recognize an embodied response? It really is just about where we place our attention. So in any given moment, when we're suffering, when we're experiencing, you know, like we say, it was really hard because I felt really sad, or it was really hard because I was really angry, or I felt really challenged because I felt really jealous. Actually, what we're feeling, what we're always kind of moving away from, not wanting to experience, and therefore drinking a glass of red wine or distracting ourselves or getting bit whatever, really what we're moving away from is unpleasant sensations. Where we experience suffering, it's actually in the body. It's the impact of the mind on the body that we're moving away from. That's kind of happening subconsciously. So really it's just about turning our attention towards and noticing the sensations we're experiencing in the moment. And so, as I said, if you have a daily embodied practice, you're just more aware of that spontaneously. Otherwise, it's a conscious choice. But all of us eventually know that. Like if an emotion gets really strong, we can feel it. You know, we talk about heartbreak, or we talk about stress, and we can feel the fight or flight response. We feel our heart beating, we feel a contraction in the throat, we feel, you know, perspiration, short, shallow breath, you know. We feel these sensations. But to know that every thought that we're thinking, or every thought that we're attaching to, is manifesting as some sensation in the body. So in my trainings, I'll get people to start to explore that directly. I'll get them to remember a certain experience of an emotion, like remember a time when you were angry, remember a time when you were really afraid, remember a time when you were experiencing love, remember a time when you were really joyful. And then to bring their attention as they're experiencing that memory to what they're feeling in the body. To start to get people to notice when I'm experiencing joy, it feels like this, some spaciousness in the chest, some opening in the heart, there's a lightness, or, you know, when I'm feeling anger, it feels like tension in the shoulders, and, you know, like there are certain sensations that you're always feeling in response to certain emotions, and the word emotion is really just the energy of that thought as emotion in the body. So it's just starting to bring attention to that. It's just shifting your focus and noticing how these thoughts that you're thinking are landing in the body. And every time you look, you will see that there's some level of either expansion or contraction. And so we can start to get directly informed by that. Because what's incredible about this human body is that it cannot lie. The body can't lie. Your mind is a master of deception.
All day long.
Yeah, that's kind of its job. It's to keep you in illusion, right? But the body never lies. And when we know that, we can, this then becomes our best friend. We can trust that. And so if we have a practice in the morning that brings us into our body, and we have a remembrance of that, maybe it's just something we remember to tell ourselves every day as an intention or an affirmation, like to come into our bodies, then we can start to listen to the body's inherent wisdom. And it's brilliant. Like every time you're aligning with a thought that's out of alignment with your truth, your body will literally be contracting in one way or another. And every time what you're thinking is aligned with your truth, your body will be expanding, opening, and flowing in one way or another. And once we know that, it's like, it's kind of game over.
Yeah.
It's like, well, all I have to do is check in.
Yeah.
And so what does checking in look like? So really that just means bringing my attention back into the moment and dropping into the body. It's just inhabiting the body. Like we spend so much time here. It's just coming in and noticing what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So often I'll start just by landing in it. Feel where my buttocks are touching this cushion. Feel where the air in the room is touching my skin. Feel where my clothes are resting on my lap, like just land in the body. And feel the flow of the breath flowing in and out. And then once I'm here, once I'm inside the body, I'll start to notice the places that are holding.
Yeah.
And then I can just bring my awareness to them. They'll start to soften, and then I'm back in the body. I'm relating to the body, and then I can, start relating to the mind, and then I'm present, and then there's that space.
I love that. And I love, in my experience, it's like when the body's ready to chat. So when you're like in there, it's like, it's full of here and 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 here.
Totally. The body is dying for your presence, maybe literally.
No, don't die.
It is gagging for your attention.
Yeah.
Because the body thrives in presence, that's all it needs. It doesn't need the mind coming in and trying to figure things out, it just needs presence. Like anybody that's ever been to a really powerful body worker knows that really all they're doing is just, we say holding space, which really just means being fully present with what is.
Yeah.
And the body just starts to unravel in that because your body is constantly communicating via this language of sensation, contraction or expansion. But because we're not listening and we're up here, those contractions get denser and denser and denser and denser until it's pain, until people arrive at a yoga class like, I've got this stuff in my neck and in my lower back. And that was always communicating as a subtle sensation, then a grosser sensation. And then eventually it's screaming out as pain or injury or disease. So, that language is always on. It's just about us learning to listen. And the thing is with yoga is each time we come to the mat, that's literally what we're unwinding. Sure, we're also unwinding physical stuff. Say I'm a surfer or a violin player. Any repetitive movement can create tension in a muscle.
Yeah.
But as a yoga teacher, the majority of what I see jammed in people's bodies is the mental repercussion in the tissue. And so people are coming onto the yoga mat and they're unwinding the past. They're unwinding their mind from the past out of their bodies. That's what they're doing. But the great thing about yoga is it's also training up your capacity to be present and embodied. So one, you're unwinding stress from the past. But two, you're training up your capacity to be more embodied so you notice in the moment the more subtle communication so it doesn't have to get to the point where it's disease. Yeah. Like screaming at you. Are you going to listen?
Yeah,
So
totally.
it also provides this immediacy to that internal communication.
And I love how, even when we're in extreme like pain or loss or trauma, you can still use these practices. Yeah. So it doesn't, not that it's going to change the sensation, but just so you can navigate your way a little bit easier through it.
Oh, Kate, so much. Like if I think about the times when, one, I transformed and transmuted the most. Yeah. And two, when I learnt the most about this, it was in my deepest suffering. Yeah. Like, I think the time that I learnt the most about everything that I'm speaking of was in one of my most intense breakups. Many people will relate to this feeling of like going through a really intense heartache, which brings up so much stuff. One, it brings up the loss, the pain of the loss, but it also brings up all your childhood wounds. It's hard. Heartbreaks are hard. And so for me, it would be the mornings that were the hardest. I'd wake up and I'd be, you know, in this dream state, and then I'd arrive back into this body that was experiencing all this pain. And so on waking, it would be like, oh, it would really hurt. And so, yeah, I learnt just to, instead of getting up and distracting myself from that, just to stay lying. It's actually when my lying practice started rather than my seated practice. Just to stay lying and just meet what was there. Because the running wasn't working.
Yeah.
You know, I'd run and distract and the pain would just be ignored and get denser and denser, and I was just really suffering. And I think sometimes it takes really suffering for you to go, I can't do this.
Yeah.
That something needs to shift.
Yeah. And the
So-
running, eventually you get to the point where you can't run anymore
Where
because
are
you're
you
that
going to go?
exhausted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And the things that you're running to don't seem to work anymore.
No.
So yeah, in the mornings I would literally just lie there, and with kind of having exhausted all my other options, would just be like, okay, I'm just going to meet it. And I'd just bring all of my awareness to what I was feeling. And I was also supported by teachers around me. But, I mean, not in the moment, but like by their wisdom.
Yeah.
So I would just literally bring my awareness to where the contraction was, and I would just be with it, like in a really unconditionally loving way, not with judgment, not trying to fix it, not trying to change it, but just be with it. And what I learnt through that direct experience is, you know, almost indescribable, but I do my best at describing it because it's the foundation of what I teach.
Yeah.
Is that when I learned that when I just sit with the energy in the body and I just meet it, not only does it start to unpack, so it starts to unravel, and in that case, lots of emotion would move, but the amount of insight that would pour through, that part of my body was speaking huge wisdom. Like the pain was not there to punish me, the pain was there to wake me up.
Yeah.
You know, so just meeting it, all of a sudden it would reveal itself. I would start to have memories, I would start to have insights about the root of this pain, and it would just open up this whole world of clarity. And I'd spent so long running from this pain, or, you know what I mean? Like seeking all the, not just distracting from it, but literally going,
avoiding it.
I don't want to experience loneliness, so I'll keep going into these relationships, for example. But then to turn around and meet loneliness inside of that flowered, what the hell was I running from? Everything that I was seeking was inside of that. I know that's a little abstract, but I really think it's about just creating time and space for you to experience that directly and see what arises out of that for yourself, rather than talk about the concepts of what arises, just to come to the practice and see that your body is speaking so much wisdom. It's not just that you have relief from the pain or that it transmutes and you get to have more space. It's that the communication itself is your gateway into massive transformation through insight, you know?
Exactly. And another thing that you mentioned, which was a huge breakthrough in my healing as well, is that when you just meet it with pure presence, it's not affirming anything, and it's just being present with whatever is, and that's all it wants. I remember, like, I'd be sitting with stuff and how can I fix this? How can I change this? And I was just constantly affirming that I was broken.
Yeah.
And I was broken and broken and broken for years and years and years and years and years. And only recently it was like, I'm not broken.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
I just need to sit here
Yeah.
and just be.
Yeah.
And that shifted so much in my biochemistry, in my relationships, everything.
Yeah.
And that presence is all you need to do. You don't need to have anything figured out. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to even know why you're in that state. It's just that pure presence.
Totally. And it's always here.
Yes.
It's always available.
Yeah.
It's not something that if you do enough practice, you'll get to it.
Yeah.
It's not over there. You don't attain it when you've done enough pranayama or enough
exactly.
chakra clearing. You know, it's like, it's right now. It's it's just who you are.
Yeah.
You are right now totally aware of this moment. It's not elsewhere. It's just going, it's just recognizing and arresting as it, no matter what's coming up.
Yeah.
It's so normal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know?
And I think, like, for me, a big part of that recognizing was it's nothing that you need to earn to be there. The fact that you have a human body gives you the right to be in it.
Yeah, totally. You are already in it. You are that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. And I really liked what you said about recognizing that you're not broken. Because, you know, while your body might be communicating tension, that's not broken. That's a working vehicle of brilliance.
Exactly.
You know, that's
exactly.
intelligence at its best.
Yeah.
And nothing's broken. It's just that you're attached to a thought that's not true.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's just occurring in the moment. And so is your presence, and all of that's just happening in a perfect moment, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And I know that you've worked with hundreds, thousands of people from all walks of life, from all over the world, all nationalities, all ages, all genders. And what do you see when they start to really embody and practice this mindfulness? Like, how does it affect their lives?
I mean, it's kind of twofold, because it's also important to know that, like, when we do that, it's not like we're just then like in this space of like, oh, I'll just be totally calm all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, the truth is, when we create more space in our life, when we're less attached to the mind, whatever's kind of underlying underneath that's out of alignment, it's going to come to the surface, and you're going to be more aware of it. So it's not like, oh, okay, all of a sudden now I'm just on this cushion of awareness and I'm in a total Zen space all the time.
Yeah.
It's important that people know that that's not the way that it is. But
What do you mean?
I don't get to just relax now. Yeah.
All this work.
Yeah, right. So, but it does mean that when that stuff's coming up, that you're training up the capacity just to rest in that space with it. So while you're cultivating more awareness, you're cultivating more space and more equanimity, more freedom from all of your reactions. So there's already a direct peacefulness available in the moment. But also inside of that, the stuff that hasn't been met with your presence goes, woohoo, she's finally here, he's finally here.
Here's some more pieces to look at.
Which is brilliant, because that's, you know, like we said, that's just wisdom rising to reveal itself. It's like, yay, like wisdom speaks through the stuff.
Yeah.
It's like the lotus comes out of the mud.
Yeah.
So that's a welcomed experience. But I think it's important for people to know that, because otherwise they could be like, oh, I've started meditating, I've started being more embodied.
Yeah.
And I expected that then I would be like,
Yeah.
But no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
But you're definitely extremely equipped through the practice to meet what's arising, and then it just starts to transmute and transform. And in that, you become less of an enslaved, entrapped, mind-addicted human that's suffering all the time.
Yeah.
And you become empowered, recognizing yourself as this open space, as the ocean floor, so that as stuff comes up, you get more and more empowered, more and more embodied, more and more free, you know? But it doesn't just go bing. It's like, it's the process of being in that spaciousness as the process
Like
unravels.
you said, it's this daily practice. Yeah. I think, you know, with my own experience, it just gives me this fluidity, so that when the storm's coming, you're not getting so thrashed around. It's like, oh yeah, all this is happening, but I'm still okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that bad. I'm actually not broken, and everything is actually fine.
Totally.
Just that
and when
remembering.
When we start to make our home in that space that's able to watch, that space is actually unmoving.
Yeah.
That space is indestructible.
Yeah.
That space, no matter what's arising, is the space that's containing all of that. And again, that can sound a little conceptual, but when you start to drop into that experience, you realize that no matter how big the storm is, it's almost like, you'll hear teachers talk about it as like, clouds are the thoughts moving through the sky, but you're the sky.
Yeah.
So whether there's big, thick grey clouds, or there's white, fluffy clouds, or no clouds, the sky remains exactly the same.
Yeah.
Even when a massive lightning storm comes, you're the sky.
Yeah.
So you're like, bring it on.
Yeah.
Like, thunderbolts and lightning, and you can be like, and it's in that spaciousness that the insight comes. But the truth is, you're always that spaciousness. So your bandwidth to meet the moment, no matter what comes, especially in the storms, just gets broader and broader, more and more realized, more embodied and integrated.
I love that. So just to wrap up, in terms of someone who's never really thought about embodiment, thought about mindfulness, thought about, or even spent time outside of that thought process or that head, what would you suggest is like the very first step? We mentioned having that daily practice of just sitting and being.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's a good place to start?
Totally. I mean, for me, what works for me, which is really all I can speak from, and in that I really acknowledge that everybody's different. But to teach from my direct experience, there's two primary tiers to developing that presence. One is through a seated practice and one is through an embodied practice. So seated being either sitting or lying, whatever works for you. But, where you can just recognize yourself as that space, letting thoughts come and go. And the other is to be into an embodied practice. So for me, that's my yoga practice, which is literally just landing in the body. So as you're doing a cat-cow, for those of you that are familiar with a cat-cow, arching the spine, rounding the spine, you're there with every sensation. You're feeling the movement of the body is following the breath. And in that union of your awareness, your body, and your breath, you just drop into the present moment. But it's through embodiment. It's through using the body as an anchor. And I feel like that's really key.
Yeah.
Because that allows me to be more aware of the expansion and contraction component of mindfulness that I'm speaking to when I'm moving around in the world. So there's this landing more in the body, and also landing more in the spaciousness that can see the thoughts coming and going. And as you're recognizing that, oh, I'm not my thoughts.
Yeah.
Thought here, thought gone, I'm still here.
Yeah.
So I recognize who I really am, and then I anchor in that place via the body. And both those tools seem to be like the two wings of mindfulness for me and for my experience.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, thank you so much, Tina.
It's my pleasure.
I could chat for hours about this, but there's been so much just juicy nuggets and really simplifying this process that, you don't have to go out and read all these sacred texts or thousands of books. It's just being present and being in your body.
And everything that you need is right here. You just need a body, a breath, and awareness. And all of that's given, it really is very simple.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.